Silabantu abaningi abatshontshiweyo ngohulumende wabantu abamnyama. Singababala yadinga isikhathi segugu labantu. Khonapha silabantu inanzelela 2 people abalama brothers abo ahambayo. Ngikhuluma ngokhulumele abake bekhangele masikhuluma ngesilobela 10-12. The last one engikhumbulayo kulumntwana welizwe PC which is labo nabanye
namba abantu bakhotshovona khona sebehlangene lapha belanda isikhumbuzo esenzakalayo phakathi kwelizwe lethu. Kukhanya balutshwana abaziwayo abacatshayo kulabanye ama-politicians acatshayo khonapha phakathi kwethu khona thina esingawaziyo. Jehova umkhulu yenza kumbe inhliziyo zethu zihlale phasi, kumbe yenza sicabange ngengqondo ezijulileyo ukuthi kambe kuyaqhubeka kuze kube nini, sithini ngakho, wena usincedisa uthini, ngoba inhliziyo zethu zibuhlungu nxa sithi sihlala phansi ukuthi sibakhumbule. Singaze sakhuluma ngesikhathi kuthiwe silengqondo ezimfitshane ezingacabangiyo njengabantu besindebele, sisithuko in public sizithulile sithi hayi sizabona engxenye wena Jehova ngenela ngebizo lakho ehlala
abantu bakithi ngizacela ukuthi kade sisonkeni isiphalameni si-observe i-minute of silence saphamela lapho bantu. Siyabonga. Anti sisuke ekhethweni siseselesithule asikwazi nokuthi kwenzakala ukuthi siyaba izolo bebembuza ngabantu baka-Studio 7 besithi sizwa kuthiwa amapholisa athi kulabantu abafuna ukuhlangana ngobulawa lesozwe ukuthi benjani behlamukela uhulumende. Ngazibuza ukuthi umkhosi wanamhlanje siyawubamba njani, kodwa ngaphinda ngathi hayi asisoze simhlamukele uhulumende. Uhulumende ngohlamukelani abantu. Anti kwezinye indawo abantu basefu beprotectwe ngani ngohulumende, but kithi we are not safe ngohulumende wethu. Njengoba sihlangana namhlanje sikhuluma nge-enforced disappearance, 99.9% yabantu esibakhumbulayo batshontshwa nguhulumende. Bengikhangele kukhulunywa ngama-85 kukhulunywa ngabantu asebetshontshwe nguhulumende enkabazo. Kuthiwa abadala bankona abanye babe lama-70 years. Kwakukhulunywa lo Emerson lo sephethe ilizwe. U-Emerson uthi no, abantu laba bacrosse ilizwe baye South Africa leBotswana eDuba bayeqeqetshwa ukuthi bebuye bezonjani bezegenqula umbuso. Amaqoqo ale how many years? 70, above 70. Yena wathini luba bophethe ilizwe kathesi, wathi phendula wathi bayeDuba abanye bayeGoli bayeqeqetshwa ukuthi bebuye bezonjani bezolisa umbuso lo okhona. Bantu bakithi sihlangana ngelanga elibuhlungu elingasoze labalula. Ngikhumbula kumnyaka olandelwe ngophelileyo sisesilobela ngoba besihlala siwenza nje, sasikhethe isilobela ngoba sathi siyikhangele sathola ukuthi yiyo elabantu abanengi abatshontshwa ngelangeni lodwa u-30 January. But kulusizi sihlangana la kule process ekhona ekahulumende eyokuthi uhulumende uthi selungisisa udaba lombhuqazwe, kodwa okulusizi ukubana abantu benkabazwe kabanjani ngabaphatheki. Okulusizi ukubana besile commission eku-chapter 12 ithemu yayo iphelile njengoba siqeda August. Ithemu yabo iphela abenzanga lutho. Umlando lo sokuthiwe unikwani izinduna. Ziqalise lazo ukuhlangana lalo baba ngo-2019, kodwa kuze kufike namhlanje akola one victim ozokuthiwe bekhuluma la. One victim. Kodwa kulokho ukuhamba back forth akula nto enjani esiphumelayo. Ngingaqedi isikhathi ngizacela ubaba uNcube
usuku lwanamhlanje i-International Day on Enforced Disappearances lusuku oluqakatheke kakhulu, particularly in Zimbabwe, given the history. I think some of the people that were enforcibly disappeared seke bathintwa ukuthi ngobani labobani. But it is important also to note that we are talking of people that run into thousands, and therefore an enforced disappearance asonto encane. That is why it is now captured in international law, and kulendlela zokuthi how we can at the end of the day utilize the provisions of international mechanisms to help address our situation. The largest number of people who were forcibly disappeared was during the Gukurahundi genocide. In fact, enforced disappearance was one of the key strategies of Gukurahundi. But before I get there, I just wanted to go through just highlighting what the United Nations defines an enforced disappearance to be, so that we may be together as we proceed. According to the United Nations Human Rights, an enforced disappearance is considered to be the arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state or by persons or groups of persons acting with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or by concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person, which place such a person outside the protection of the law. So this is very, very important. And an enforced disappearance is characterized by three cumulative elements. The first one is the deprivation of liberty against the will of the person. The second one is the involvement of government officials, at least by acquiescence. The third one is the refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty or concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the person disappeared. What is the consequence of an enforced disappearance? An enforced disappearance has a doubly paralyzing impact on the victim, who is removed from the protection of the law, frequently subjected to torture, in constant fear for their lives, and on their families ignorant of the fate of their loved ones, their emotions often alternating between hope and despair, wondering, waiting, sometimes for years, for news that may never come. Enforced disappearance has frequently been used as a strategy to spread terror within societies. To spread terror within societies. The feeling of insecurity generated by this practice is not limited to the close relatives of the disappeared, but also affects their communities and society as a whole. That's very, very important to establish ama outlines are your enforced disappearance. So what we are gathered to talk about here is an act that was perpetrated by the state. That's the starting point. An enforced disappearance is committed by the state. Why? So it is a crime committed by the state. That's very important. It is a crime committed by the state with an intention to spread terror within a society. So it is the state itself spreading terror and fear within a society. Enforced disappearance works because you can actually hide your footprints. Unlike the mass murders that will be taking place in the streets under trees, ezenzakalayo in some communities, in some countries, when you commit enforced disappearance, you are able to commit it, uchiye abantu wondering exactly what happened to their loved ones. You can actually divide society. Some saying this one went there, some saying uye laphana, abanye besithi uye ngapha, abanye besithi uye ngapha kanjalo. Bona ngokwabo even relatives won't agree ukuthi kwenze njani. Abanye will actually say no uye Goli, abanye bathi no I think sehlala lo Mazakhele. Abanye bathi sehlala nga. So there is that debate, a paralyzing debate in society and amongst the relatives. So besides spreading terror within society, it divides abantu. Enforced disappearance also spreads fear, causing people to suspect one another. People that are affected by enforced disappearance usually do not unite even for priority political causes. They remain divided for a long time, suspecting each other even within the community, suspecting that probably umuntu who was enforcibly disappeared kwenzeke because my neighbor participated in that. But also it is important to note what your feelings as a community and as relatives alternate between hope and despair. Hope in the sense that every day you believe, year after year, decade after decade, that your loved one is coming back. Each time you see umuntu othutshayo walking towards ekhaya, you think that is the person who disappeared. Limkhangelele lwana umuntu, you refuse to believe ukuthi wabulawa. That is the power of hope. You believe maybe somewhere, maybe he was detained, maybe use police station, maybe he is somewhere. And even maybe he went to South Africa, maybe he went to Botswana, maybe he went to Zambia, maybe he went to the UK. You keep that hope burning within yourselves and as a community. But because of that, you do not take the necessary steps to address it. Because you think that the fate of the person is yet to be decided. The fear that then a corner, where on another day you have that fear instead of hope, you fear that they may come for you. You fear that they may come for additional members of the community. You fear that your loved one has been killed. You fear that your loved one is being tortured wherever they are. So it is a paralyzing situation for abantu abahlezi community, not knowing exactly how to respond to a disappearance. They have a fear of the government, anger against the state that they suspect committed the act of enforced disappearance. But because they are fluctuating between fear, anger, and hope, they also lift that anger against the state, believing that the state is not responsible. You see where the danger is. So you will find people who have been victims of enforced disappearance actually falling in love with the state, believing that the state is not responsible. On another day, being angry against the state, believing the state is responsible. But what is important is that the United Nations came up with the Convention on Enforced Disappearances that puts the obligation on the state to address the people's right to the truth. The issue of the right to the truth that is so fundamental today in addressing mass atrocity crimes like genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the related, it started around the issue of enforced disappearances, particularly in South America. That the people have a right to the truth. And when we say the people, we are talking about the immediate relatives as well as society in general. They have a right to the truth about the fate of the person who disappeared. And there is a corresponding obligation on the part of the state to fulfill the right to the truth by conducting a prompt, independent, and effective investigation about the disappeared person and fitting back into the community. Tina, for us, for all the disappearances that have taken place, no effective remedy has been granted. The state has failed its obligation to conduct an effective investigation into the disappearances of the people. The reason being, particularly around the issue of Kukurahundi, first and foremost, the state was the one that was responsible for the disappearance of the people that we are still looking for. And therefore, you don't expect the state to come out effectively investigate itself, its role in the enforced disappearances of the people. Many people that were forcibly disappeared, kwakusetshenziswa different strategies depending on the victim, depending on the situation and so forth. We have people that were working, say, in Mount Dawi, in Manicaland, in Maswingo, who were ex-members of ZIPRA, but who were now integrated into the Zimbabwe National Army. One of the strategies that they did was they would give you, in the layman's language, off days. Go home. Hambo bona bantwana. Kanti kule roadblock endleleni ebhasini. Bakuthathele khona laphana endleleni. What this then does, what it did, was that ama relatives azi ukuthi ubaba ubhudi usemsebenzini. Ngale, they also did something egangileyo. After bekuthethe endleleni lapha, later on they go to your home. Bafike bathi sidinga uNdlovu. Kwenzela ukuthi umkhondo wenze njani? Ulahle. Bathi uNdlovu uthola ilifu. Kanti kangafiki la. Hayi kafikanga. Uthi ngabe senjani? Benze sengathi ba serious bayamdinga. But sebemenzeni, sebemthethe. That was one of the strategies. Another strategy that was used was ukuthi abantu bathathelwa emsebenzini in towns, and they were never again seen up to today. Esinye strategy that was used was ukuthi abantu babelandwa emakhaya ezindlini, in town and in rural areas. Kunoke abantu. Remember, we have said the crime of enforced disappearance is perpetrated by the state. And in Zimbabwe, the state is the primary perpetrator of enforced disappearance. Before independence, during the Kukuraundi genocide, and since the Kukuraundi genocide, the state has been the primary actor in enforced disappearance, in abduction of people, in killing of people. Actually, the state has killed more people in Zimbabwe than any other organized group. The very state that is charged by the constitution to protect people is the one that has been killing people, that has been heavily involved in enforced disappearance. So sometimes also they will go emakhaya, for instance, during Kukuraundi, they will get there and then bafike bavulela inkomo ehlobo. Inkomo, you know, the ama-bells. So bavula lapha. They know ukuthi people will respond by ukuphuma. Ukuthi inkomo lezi ziyangena emasimini abantu. That was a strategy that was utilized endaweni ezinengi. You go there, umama labantwana bayakugcina usiyalanda inkomo, usiyazivalela. To date, since 1983, since 1984, since 1985, since 1986, that person has never been seen. Abanye babethathelwe emsebenzini being teachers or nurses. One of the primary target groups of Kukuraundi was the intellectuals. Just destroying not just the breadwinners, but the leadership of your community. They went for teachers. Many of the disappeared were taken from schools. Ogcinakale umuntu esuka from enkaya siyafundisa eMatobo, wathathelwe eMatobo, has never been seen before, since that time. So there were multiple ways in which enforced disappearances were perpetrated. But there is one important player in all that. The key perpetrator was the state. And that has not changed. It is important also to note that a crime of enforced disappearance is a continuing crime, like theft. So it doesn't matter ukuthi yenzeka nini. It is our responsibility to locate where those people are, or at least to come to the full truth about the circumstances of their disappearance and their ultimate fate. Is important. Additionally, the United Nations has created a working group on enforced disappearances. Is it a year ago or 2 years ago where we submitted to United Nations a list of people that were disappeared, including the Slovenia people? They continue to receive names abantu, particularly of those that disappeared after the coming into force of the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. But they are not blind to issues around Kukuraundi. When we were doing that, they actually say it is important that we compile a list. It is important that we do not limit ourselves to gathering and saying there are people who have forcibly disappeared. We need to put names on the figures. Let's go beyond statistics. People are not statistics. People are not statistics. People have names. People have surnames. People are mothers, are fathers, they are husbands and wives. They are brothers and sisters. You need to say, here is a list of people that were forcibly disappeared. And in gatherings of this nature, it is important that we go through those lists. We read through the list. So and so, so and so, so and so this month, so and so this month, and so forth. Those names are there out there. They are written in some book, one or the other, so it's important that we do our job. And we keep piling the pressure on the state. That we are very clear that we are angry about the people that were forcibly disappeared by the state. That we are not about to give up looking for them, determining their fate. We can't move on. We must never move on. Because to ignore that is to ignore thousands of families and households who lost the people directly, who are still looking today. Move on. I have always wondered what is the discussion like between abantu bakithi who are in ZANU-PF and perpetrators of enforced disappearance during Kukurawundi who are in ZANU-PF. What is the conversation that takes place there around that crime? Bafike balala bahlala bakholisa badla bakhohle ukuthi abantu abaningi kangaka were killed, were forcibly disappeared, were raped or otherwise affected. Or there is a conversation that is taking place. I don't believe there is any conversation that is taking place. So it's important for citizens themselves, the people of this country, the communities that were affected, to take steps to pile up the pressure on the perpetrators. In transition in Zimbabwe, any transition, any political transition, any changes away from the status quo to anything must factor in the fact that we are looking for our people who disappeared. We must not suddenly shift to democratization issues, freedom of speech, freedom of association, assembly, and all those things. Important as they are not as important as the crimes that were committed during Kukurawundi. We must not forget that. We must argue for the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the right to free and fair election, but also at the same time, in the same lines, we demand a credible way of addressing the Kukurawundi genocide. Not some other process that will simply wash or push under the carpet, sweep under the carpet the crimes that were committed at the time. We must demand the non-recurrence of those crimes. Into enzakalayo is that what was committed during Kukurawundi has continued. There are people who were forcibly disappeared in the 1990s, forcibly disappeared since 2000. There are people who potentially can be forcibly disappeared today, tomorrow, and going forward. Because the perpetrators of the crimes of Kukurawundi remain intact. The institutions of Kukurawundi are intact. So the crimes that they were committing in Matabeleland are being extended to other parts of the country. They forcibly disappeared thousands of people in Matabeleland, but they are also doing it in different provinces as well. So we must do everything as a people to disable opportunities of enforced disappearances, to disable the institutions, the infrastructure of enforced disappearance, abductions that we see. Each time we are going into an election, there is fear in communities that people might disappear. And that has a tendency to pull down political participation amongst the people because of that fear. Even in ekhaya lihlezi usukuma usithi ufuna ukulida ufuna ukuparticipate politically, your family, your relatives tend to warn you asifuni ukuthi ulandele umalumakho ubhuti wakho ubaba lobani uwe forcibly disappeared. So chiyana le politiki. It is taking away people from political participation because it is continuing fear. What happened in 1983, the ramifications, the impact, the fear okuyifake ebantwini can still be felt today. There are people who think ukuthi if I stand up to vote, if I stand up to voice my concerns about the direction of the country, I will be forcibly disappeared. Because a relative or a member of the community was forcibly disappeared. So until such a time we have addressed that crime, and until such a time we break the backbone of the institutions of enforced disappearance, if fear within the community will never be washed away. People will continue to what? To fear. To fear. Let's organize. Let's organize as a society. Let's come together as a society and never forget the people who were forcibly disappeared. They ran into thousands, men and women and children. Kulabantu who were disappeared with their children, and they've never been located since that time. So this day is an important day in closing. An extremely important day, particularly for this country. A very, very important day for families who lost people, for communities who lost people. We must always, when we are gathered here, be talking about strategies of locating abantu who were forcibly disappeared. We must use this day, utilize these opportunities to pile up the pressure. We must have in our minds whether we are going to cast our votes, the people who disappeared. Whether you are going to do this or that, let us always pay attention to what happened in the past in this country, because the past of human rights violation is the present of human rights violation. It never changes until you have gotten to a stage where you are able to address what happened. It was a strategy before independence. Some of the people like Ethan Dube and others who were enforcibly disappeared in the 1970s. The infrastructure, the colonial infrastructure of enforced disappearance was inherited in 1980 and never reformed. In fact, it was beefed up. It was strengthened. It was capacitated. The budget for enforced disappearance was raised, so that the number of people who were forcibly disappeared in the 1980s are more than the number of people that were forcibly disappeared during the entire colonial period. So it's important that we know that the crime of enforced disappearance is the crime that is committed by the state. And the fact that we are talking about the crimes that were committed by the state reminds us of the importance of reforming this state. This is a state that is structured for violence and not for democracy. It is a state that is structured for denial of human rights and not for protection of human rights. It is a state that is structured for torture and not for human dignity. It is a state that is structured for limitations on human rights and not preservation of human life. It is a state that is structured not to work for the people. And what we are seeing today, continuing, even if it is not of the same scale as we saw during Kukurawundi, is a manifestation of an unreformed state that was structured for violence that continues to believe in violence, that acts through violence, everything that it is doing is based on violence and rejecting the will of the people every time. I thank you.
Mina ngizakhuluma ngendaba kaPaul Andrea Chizuza. uPaul ube ngumni wabo waleli jaha uPlum Charles abesebenzi uZibethu and uPaul imaze kudala mina sisebancane sikhulele nje uPaul beyigenge yakujinga mina ngokuningi bami bengiyigenge yaku infact bengiyigenge yaku ngase ngitshintshela ngapha ku so yizo indawo zethu zelezana ngaleso sikhathi liyakwazi ukuthi lokuze abafana benjulo ovele kusenzakala nesibhe lokwana ukuthi kwesinye isikhathi wena nxa ungani awukho right awudluli la uyaphiwa iP uthi awudluli lokuthi asozuye uvelela ngale uzodinga umambeni bethi ngapha angithi so uPaul sakhula ngayena leyo ndlela ekuji sikwazi ukuthi ngalo kulabo Paul wayemdala kulami ngathi it was like 4 months my senior sesingachiyana uPaul sakhula sala esiyakhona thina abanye sahlanya lapha sahlanya sala bathe sebesiphendulile khona ngale bathi si right sabuya sazojoin abanye sa integrate wakathi into the community right uPaul sibuye sazodiwa na futhi sesisebenza kwaMoney Trust uPaul I think uPaul joined us like 3 years after I'd actually joined and khona ukuthi lo Paul sasikwanisa ukuthi I remember kulezi stories ake sathi sixoxa sintu sasi driver nje sincedisa wona la madoda la sidlule number 6 lapha eduzane le press ngithi mina kuPaul Paul omunye umnyaka sake sathi sisiye esikolo ekuseni la sathola kulo muntu oyezibophele lapha wabona lapho sole ground eJY City la then Paul says unokuzelona phela sabuya sazombona engakayithulo konfana that sense and I realized ukuthi lokho engale ngapha ngithi ama experiences zethu ayiphose ayifanana so sesisebenza sesindawonye because of the age yethu yenelana my experiences zethu we became very close with Paul. We actually became friends. Was what I think it was the 7th of February 2011 when Paul was disappeared. Paul says Paul wafika egedini lendlu yakhe eyo side esesegedini the south of so sama tono west uthe yitho west khona phala ukuthi ngibona kwami confused ngemva kwesikolo semasepa manje sana right so Paul kwamphambula khona phana vele sefikile endlini siza kwamkhona Paul imuli report ukuthi uPaul kayimazi and kwaba irresponsibility yami futhi njengoba ungana meseduza ukuthi simdinge uPaul saba yithi until yakwazi ukuthi umuntu engadisappear kuyafana ukuthi kuthiwe hlala 3 days wathi ungathangani selingahamba le check ezibhedlela selingahamba le check emapholiseni selingathi hamba le check emochari that painful experience yokuthi usuhamba usiyadinga uexpecta ukuthi uzabona umfowenu either emochari kumbe esibhedlela engakhulumi kumbe esitokisini enqevele engalogwanga ini. So we went through that. Kulo munye umfowabo okuthiwa Mike, angithi. I worked very closely with Mike because Mike vele wabe ngithi bra, but bengithi bra unina walaba amajahala uMandlovu. So babe sithi khazi kumbe bethi malume yimi khona ukuthi vele labe seli very close. Okunye kwakhona ukuthi yena ubaba wakho umdala uShizuzi umuntu esasivele simjayele kakhulu ikakhulu eRoma, angithi. So babe ngabantu esasivele sijayelene kakhulu la udade wabo kaPaul uSister Maxine sasijayelene kalaye futhi kakhulu. So we worked very hard sesizama ukuthi sidinge uPaul. Ngalitshela ukuthi sanelisa ukuthi yabona danger la because uPaul wayehambe nge-twin cap yakhe danger lapha sake sehla sizama ukuthi sidinge engcenye uPaul uthe ehambe emgwaqweni lapha imoto yangena igama sehla saze safika sakuthola ukuthi phansi ngale kule labo makorokoza ngesibonda phansi khona lelo kuze sidinga uPaul and wasithatha isikhathi eside konke lokhu kusenzakala. And I think on that occasion, in that period, suspenda some visitela eSouth Kabi I wanna see but ngemva kwe about 6 months or so but imoto kaPaul ibonakale eBedbridge iphakiwe duzane lelo kuze immigration office lapha neduzane and ngahamba futhi lo Mike ukuthi siye identify imoto siye clear emapholiseni eBedbridge ukuthi sibuye ngapha. We were shocked to find imoto le iphakwe khona phana number 2 I think for me lokho esidlula khona all the time sesidlule group sihamba ngezimoto eziningi sifike siphaka imoto zethu ngaphana singenele ukuze sihambe clear ama passport ethu sibuye sithathe lokho izimoto khona but we discovered that car after 6 months. I think it was almost 6 months, 4 to 6 months. Yawazi ukuthi eBedbridge kulothululu njani ukuthi imoto lena kwasokunzima lokuthi unanzelele lekhala yemoto ngoba eBedbridge kuyabathuli ayigeziswa imile khona pha lesicathulo zakhe zazilokho ezikhona phakathi and for your own information success sesiyithatha imoto lena wait to drive it such long seshaye isikhiye kuphela ka1 imoto yes no problem sabuya and khona wasiconfuse ukuthi umuntu uthathelwe angithi and now sesiyathola imoto kachana khona imoto yangikhona i-right imoto yangikhona email phela esasihlala sidlula khona sonke ama teammates akhe singayibona angithi. So it wasn't a pleasant sort of surprise ukuthi nasi imoto engceke we can see ukuthi iruthi yakhe angabe ayithatha abayithatha naye wahamba njani. So that was the thing. We did discover it was imoto kaPaul yakhe and it was still up to me like I said ukuthi sasikhule sonke uPaul. So even lamadoda lana sebe clear imoto they also wanted a statement from me ukuthi khona wena uyamazi uPaul angithi likhule lonke uPaul ubone ngani uPaul what if we say uPaul useMalawi what would you say what if abamaningi, but I will tell you at that time, I think I was a bit numb. I won't say I'm very brave. They might think, but I think at that time I was very numb because in the poll, I was actually shocked with Uncube when he was doing a presentation. Because I did the counseling, the movie. Although I was like part of Imuli, but I was also assisting Umama, forward let it come to terms with what has happened. Not really reassuring them, but saying, how can we move on despite the fact that all this has happened? And I was actually shocked with Uncube uthinta khona phana engani wayeyenza i-case study yokuthi ngemva kokuba upho esehambile wakuhamba njani, because we were also very close naye Uncube at that time. He worked very closely lo Chizuze. He was equally affected situation, but i-characteristic yokwenzakala kwezinto when somebody disappeared, I think we bethe njengoba injalo konke khona ukuthi imuli igcina ingasazwisisani ukuthi wena uthi umuntu ongehlula uzunte imoto egedini wena maybe you should have done this, all that, because one thing that we realize is even when we deal with such families, it's a loss, it's a bereavement. And the person goes through all the stages of bereavement, the grief, we are zonda, we are sola, we are bargainer. Acceptance becomes the last thing, and even kachana kakhulu lalapho umuntu ayabe khona. So, in a nutshell, loba amadoda la kade ngasho ukuthi izilungiselele ngabathe twengi izilungiselele alami kade ngizabe ngifaka ama-points amele ukuze lengxenye kade zaba ngake, but unfortunately khona ukuthi ngisukume, this is unedited, direct from my heart. I thank you.
Uyazi indaba eka-Charles I think ngake ngaxoxa noHadi ngakho. uCharles ngesikhathi enyamalala sasincedise that constable owayelengoma eyilo Morgan, eyihlabelo kwaMorgan, that constable owayebased eNtanga Zintuli wayesuka eMrewa. I think that boy came from Mrewa. So uthe esebanjwe elengoma liyana lapha eNtanga Zintuli kwaba huge issue. So he then wanted ukufakwa kuma-safe house. We traveled, me and Charles, to Ntanga Zintuli to take that boy. Sazombeka St. Gabriel. That St. Gabriel ephambi koGreenza. Safika sambeka wona for about 4-5 days. We were in charge there. It was me, Charles, and Hussein Ismail, all Christian lines. After that, kwazofanele simsuse lapha asiwe somewhere. Sabela ukuthi bangambamba ngoba waye impilo yakhe yayisi under serious threat. We then removed that boy there. Samhambisa lapha samhambisa. After a week, Charles disappeared. You can imagine the fear that I had, the fear that was there who Senswan, which we were 3. Sincedisa ujaha osishoneni lwana, and one of us sethethwe sesihambe. So we waited ukuthi well kuthi ukuthi lathi we will go. So that's bengithi ngezelele kuba ukuthi during the time Charles ehamba, we were very close to Charles, though he was older than me. Sasisebenza kuhle no Jesus. So sasincedise, ngicabanga ukuthi sanyathela ikhonza abantu ngokuncedisa umfana lo ngoba babefuna ukumjezisa, but because i-line of work yethu yayi isitsho ukuthi simncedise lo mfana, samncedisa. So that was that. Right, mina ngisuka eNkabazo yokuselwa Gwelo. I call that ima Jabeleland East Immigrants. Ngilabo malume abangu-2, uRoger Mpofu lo Moses Mpofu, who disappeared. Bathathwa ebusuku, bathathwa abantu ababegqoke uniform yesibutho. But Mos was not active in politics like uRoger. Mos he had a year ebuyile ekhaya retired from Zimbabwe always. So kwakulomunye owayesebenza noRoger, wawusithi nxa usuka emzini kaRoger uhambe phose a kilometer uzafika uMakhosi Mpofu, who was the secretary ezapho. uRoger was the chairperson ezapho. So laba abantu babethe betshelwa ukuthi nxa lisuka kuRoger liyahamba northwards and then lizafika ku-M Mpofu. So babedinga u-M Mpofu. Then bathi besuka kuRoger base bengena koMos. uMos ngumnakhe kaRoger. uMos nguyowachiyelo umama Ibhele. So uMos wafela amafufu njengegundwane, wayengekho ku-politics was, but because base befice u-M Mpofu loyana, wena bafuna uMakhosi Mpofu, base bethatha uMoses. So bahamba-ke umuntu lo mnawakhe kanjalo banyamalala. But prior to that, ku-business area eyakithi kwabuya kwafika kwahlala amadoda ayethwele ama-AK begqoke izigqoko zabo. Bahlala for a month or 2. Babe harasa sibili abantu amadoda akhona osisi babezibambela okwenkani. They were very rough, very cheeky. Engicabanga ukuthi laba abantu yibo abafika babhala amabizo of i-leadership yezabo, and then base behenda over kulaba ababuya sebethathe ebusuku. And then banyamalala njalo till today. Imizi yabo malume yahle yachitheka ngoba abafelokwazi babengakwazi ukuthi laba abantu bazaphenduka bafike bathathe labantwana what. So basuka bachiya imizi yani siyachitheka sengumamanqina. And then I have a brother. Ubhuti wahamba empini watraina Angola, Angola wathi Semboromo. Yeah, but what basuka in northern whatever. Angola. Yeah, lapha trainer khona. Wabuya eZambia wafika wa trainer again. Wafika wa trainer again advance training wasuka lapho waya eCuba. Wabuyela eZambia wasuka lapha futhi esiya trainer further waya eYugoslavia. Wabuya kuFront. Why operate la eUrungu, Espolilo, Tembo area there. Then came isikhathi soku ceasefire. Wabuya ekhaya. This is where I got all this information from him. Lapha I operated lapha. He was part of the group eyabuya yazothatha abafana beSiren la bahamba lawo empini. Fortunately, one of the girlfriend yakhe, isweetheart wakhe, isikhathi besesikolo bese ekhaya khona ngayo. Wayesesenza i-temporal teaching eLokuzeni lapho eSiren. That woman wazama la ukuthi athi no ukuthi unjela kwaScience kwaba umsindo but wacela emchini. Nguye obuya isezostela thina ukuthi hayi ubhudweni wena abantwana ukuthi abathethwe eLokuzeni lapha bathethwe nguye. He was commanding abantu bakhona walile ukuthi ngihambe naye. And then naye uthe sekuyiwa wathi I could not go with you because wena wawucabanga ukuthi empini kuya into yokudlala mina ngase ngikwazi ukuthi awusoze ukwanise, so that's why I refused. Wasesiba ku National Army but abadala basebesithi kuye no look ndoda you need to ukuthi uchiyane lento ye-army le akuhlale phansi wakho umuzi lawe ubona ukuthi impilo suhamba wabuya lelizwe is okay now but wase lobola ubhuti walobola umama wakuthiwa nguMaseko. Then wahamba engumuntu osesiya resign sesiya save last month yakhe and then abesebuya sezozihlala ekhaya. His very close friend before and after the war was Richard Kwesela. So sasis eqhibeni likabhuti sasilala sonke nabo Kwesela lobhuti kwathiwa nguNorman Baby elempini kwathiwa nguWilfred Mkhwanazi. So sasilala ndawonye. uRichard ungasuka ngakithi kule ize2 kwakuloyisekazi owayendele lapho koMpofu. So wayebuya esiza koyisekazi. So wayehlala isikhathi lapha abeseselusa inkomo eselusa lobhuti. Inkomo zakoyisekazi eselusa ezakhe. Bahamba bonke empini. They came together. Ubhuti esechiya lapha uRichard wayevele esechiya. Yena wayedela ukumbiza ethi Zedius. Kodwa nguZedius elempini, Zedius. So wayesithi Z. And then ubhuti uthe esehambe waya ngale wangaphenduki until unkosikazi abadala bathi kahamba echeck. Uthe siya check ngale bafika bathi wasuka khona ngale kako wasuka. Wabuya lowana wafika wasitshela ukuthi uBaby uthiwa wasuka ngale kako eCambodia. That was the day uZedius became a dissident. He then came home ezodinga umngane I remember it was during summer 1983. Kwakule nkomo eyayifile sasiyihlinza labafowethu eceleni kwexhego likabhuti. He came carrying 3 guns. Who said yes? Brand new. Ama-AK then la lefuqwayo le. He asked me ukuthi uWilly uma lokho elingamboni ngithi hayi lokho singamboni ngakho vele unkosikazi waqambe wamdinga ngale abe camp bathi ngakho futhi camp wasuka. Surprisingly he wanqapha wabe flatela wafohla uthango eseqa uthango wafohla wasuka wahamba. He left. That was the first day ukumbona ethwele isibhamu ngoba ngazi ngimbazi bengamasevili. So he came there esethwele isibhamu. Ndoda lo ukuthi wasuka wahamba. We tried to trace ubhuti ngoba ubaba waye very active weze politics. Waye ngu-chairman weziyapapa branch lapha eMabusela. Indlu yangithi yaye ku-4th Street 1651 4th Street eMakoko. So that area in Mabusela Flats liyani lapho ukuhlala khona undodana ngakibo kwandodana Madleni. We grew up together in that area. And then some of the guys ababebuya lapha bezama ukumdinga ababe ku-CID and so forth. The last time ebonakala watholakala e-Stops Camp la wayefuqwa efakwe utroli wayengasakwanisa ukuhamba wayefuqwa but esaphila. That's the last lokhuzini yami. Okay. We have a lot of friends, both who army, CIO. They have tried to trace. There is no trace. So what it points to is that efuqwa ebutroli yana. I think that was the last time. Wayesesiyabulawa. That was that. Esanda ukuthatha engakabi lo mntwana eseresignile serving his last man. Because government you then give a notice